So yesterday I started asking people to, one, introduce themselves and tell me about where you've come from, what you do, what you focus on. But also, to kick this off, I wonder if you could tell me also a little bit about, from your perspective, about what sort of changed in terms of travel preferences. What are the kind of the big changes, the big shifts that you're seeing? And I'll start just quickly, straightforwardly to my left. Andy, can you tell us who you are, where you come from, and give us your perspective?
Morning, everyone. I'm Andy, which easily forgettable name. Second event I've been at where I couldn't remember my name, so I'm doing something wrong. And I'm glad they've used my heavily tanned photo, so it shows I do like to travel. I'm one of those people who says they want to do a leisure activity trip and end up just booking a beach. So as per the TripAdvisor guys. So we're very pleased to be one of the sponsors here today. Nilas, we ran a workshop yesterday, so thanks to the people who attended that. So, I mean, very simply, we have an email and calendar API that can connect into people's platforms and applications, which enable direct connectivity with the consumer's calendar and email. And we talk about things like syncing to enable that seamless user experience for customers when they're doing things like booking flights, hotel rooms, and things like that. But then, really importantly, is dragging insights from emails and directly from customers. So that's what we do. We're here for a couple of days, so happy to talk to you guys later. In terms of travel, we're really learning more and more about that space by talking to the likes of yourselves, because we've come from working with software tech companies into e-commerce and retail, where they're really trying to get more and more insights about their customers to upsell and grow their business and retain repeat customers. And in travel, I think really seeing that going from offering people everything to people wanting that more refined personalization is a big thing. So rather than saying like, here's 10 flights which are available on that day, saying actually based on your schedule and your preferences, here's the best flight at the best price, and giving you a couple of options, really personalized experience. So, that's one of the key areas.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Gerald.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Pass the baton on to yourself.
I introduce myself, Gerald, my name, from Lufthansa. A very complicated title, I have to say. I'm wondering myself what it means, but basically it means that I'm responsible for the e-commerce platform within the Lufthansa group, so including Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian, Brussels Airlines in this case. To answer your questions in terms of how did the preferences from the customer perspective change during the last 2 years, actually, we saw 3 phases for Lufthansa, I would say. So the first phase was actually when the pandemic really hit us, right? So we had to cancel a lot of flights. Basically, we were grounded, as you know. So people were actually happy that we operated some flights to get back to their friends, families. But also refund became suddenly a big issue. So we had to cancel almost every flight, and the customer wanted the money back. So we haven't been prepared at all for this. Then the second phase was in beginning of 21, April 21, I would say, when we saw that the demand was picking up in Europe, in continental Europe. So people were flying again, they wanted to go on vacation. Suddenly we had travel regulations in place, right? So the borders were closed, it was not clear how to get in and out to the countries. And the people were looking for, where can I go to? How can I get in and how can I get out, and what travel documents do I need? So certainly we had the questions, show me where to fly, but also make the process as smooth as possible, because it's a big mess. It's really complicated. And the last phase is actually what we saw and still seeing this year. So a big increase in the demand, especially for cont and intercont. Together with other things happened also on airport sides. This ended up in a big mess, and we had to cancel again flights, a lot of flights. But the customer need changed again, because customer didn't want the money back. They wanted to either go to the holiday location or to get back from the holiday location. So then they needed to rebook a flight. So what does it mean? So it means that over the last 2 years, it changed, the demand for certain functionalities, features changed a lot. But overall, we can say that the demand for self-service functionalities really increased a lot. to enable also the customer to solve the problems by themselves, right, was really a big issue, or is still a big issue. And last but not least, I would say we have been too slow in reacting to those needs. So we need also to be faster to solve those needs. Yeah. Perfect. Sorry, it was a little bit of a longer introduction, but I hope
an itemized list. Can't fault that. Thank you very much. But I'll come back to some of those kind of things, some of the stuff that Andy, you said, and some of the stuff that Gerald, you said in a minute. But Anuradha, can I ask you to introduce yourself and give us your perspective as well? Because you're coming from a different sort of like space.
Yeah. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Anuradha. I work for Whitbread Restaurants. As a part of my role, I am responsible for the e-commerce and trading strategy for restaurants, as well as the digital product transformation development roadmap. So I think it's fair to say that since 2019, a lot has changed. You know, first with the COVID and now with the cost of living crisis. So both of these things, I think, have made customers and us as people just realize, you know, what are our priorities, and looking at it from a totally different perspective and mindset. So one of the things that we can see, and that touches all of us, is, you know, how much disposable income do we have? What are our, you know, what do we count as good value for money? What is the, you know, the experience that we want out of holidays, travel, etc. And then definitely the other most important thing is around, you know, there is a cost of the holiday, of course, but also what is it in terms of, you know, offers, promotions that you can get from the company or the brand, which makes you feel that you are really getting a good value for money when you're going there on holiday. So as a part of all of this, there is also the other aspect. Because we've been through COVID and we've seen the issues and the problems with flight cancellations and, you know, refunds and all of that, there is still that nervousness. What if my travel doesn't go ahead? So with all of these taken into consideration, one of the things that we find is that, and I represent Whitbread, so there is the hotel side of the business, and then there is the restaurant side of the business. So on the hotel side of the business, because majority of our hotels are in the UK, we find that versus 2019, we are massively up. Whereas on the restaurant side of the business, we're not quite there yet. We're almost there, but not quite. So what we can see, that staycations definitely have been one of the main reasons there. But overall, if we want to look at it, we can see that whilst we can see a surge in number of passengers and bookings and all of that, but different brands are experiencing different things. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like the same trend in every brand. So that's one side. And then the next part of it is that people have started combining the experience because of remote working, hybrid working. Where you work from is no longer an issue. So people are combining, you know, work and leisure and, you know, business travel as well. When we look at it, yes, you know, companies are thinking about budgets as well. So business leisure, although has started to progress, but it's not quite there in terms of when you look at numbers versus 2019. So I think it's not just one factor. There are a number of factors which, you know, have changed people's travel preferences since 2019.
It's got complicated.
Yes. And the mix has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Toby.
I mean, what a comprehensive set of answers. I don't know what else I can...
You're just not going to bother now, are you?
No, exactly, yeah, what they said. No, so my name's Toby Morris, so I work at a company called Epsilon. So Epsilon is, essentially we're a marketing technology organisation. We offer kind of various different ID-led solutions in things like CRM, display media, loyalty and messaging, and I look after our kind of travel business here in Europe. I mean, yeah, and jokes aside, I mean, you know, obviously all, you know, valid answers to the question. I think the only, I'd ask to add two things to that. I think the first one is that a lot of the brands that I talk to, particularly on the package and a little bit on the airline side of things, I'm not sure whether this is still a kind of typical year to understand what consumer change is, because there's been so much COVID rollover. So people rolling over trips from 2020, 2021. I was talking to a couple of the delegates here from P&O Cruises about this yesterday. Because I did that myself in the summer. I had a trip to France that I wouldn't necessarily have gone on now, but because it was all sort of booked and ready to go in the summer, I kind of felt obliged I had to do it. So I don't know whether we are still fully aware of what the complete consumer change is until we get a sort of year where that sort of doesn't happen. So I think actually 2023 will be a much better barometer of what consumer change is. The other thing I just wanted to add, which is less on the consumer side, more on the business side of things, is that consumers have, in that 2-year period, changed phones, maybe bought a new TV, maybe moved. So, maybe unlikely to switch to email, but the data that a brand has about that consumer is probably slightly out of date. And so how a brand then talks to consumer, because of the changes that have occurred in their life outside of travel, is now really, really important. And the data that they have around that is now really, really important. So we talk a lot about the data hole. So this data hole of between 2020 and now-ish, whereby, people haven't necessarily been interacting with brand sites, and so they haven't been able to kind of get that visibility into a customer, and so then trying to reach that customer with a commercial message saying, here's an offer, here's a new route, here's a new property, is really hard. So we sort of talked to lots of brands about how they're trying to navigate that change. So, Sorry, that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like you just give me this big heap of plate spaghetti that I've got to untangle. So, thank you. That's fascinating. I mean, it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. It's complicated. But I wonder if we can start with, because we talked, the title of the panel is like, how can you build a customer-centric digital experience, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, a digital experience is a product of what you do internally. You talk about the data side of things, Toby. Andy, you were talking about the kind of the amount of choice that people are giving, and maybe the production of, or the offering of choice is it a function, do you think, of how people aren't really understanding what's going on because there's so many moving kind of parts, and people are going like, well, let's give people everything that we can want, because they don't. Is there a gap in understanding? And
yeah, I mean, I agree very much with what Toby said, in the sense that how are we actually able to pivot as organisations in terms of what we as consumers actually want or are doing, and your point around, and Anuradha's point as well around that travel change. So from a business traveller perspective, I'm trying to combine not getting that silly o'clock flight in the morning to get back because I feel I've got to do a working day in the office, because I can actually work from pretty much wherever I am. So I'm going to get a flight 6 o'clock in the evening because I can spend some time in Stockholm or wherever and try and work and relax, right? So our preferences are changing as well, but how are we able to get those insights to see that and be able to be really flexible? And I do think there's a demographic who really want that personalisation, and I might be included in that. I'm not, and then there's a demographic who may be on the budget airline flights where it doesn't really matter because they're always going to book because it's the cheapest available flight or to more destinations, right? So I think organisations have to look at their different segmentations, which I know you guys all do and heavily look at, but it's how you can actually look at that in that real-time sense, and that's the really hard bit, I think. And just sort of to add to that as well is how we then enabling to see what those ancillary add-ons would be, whether it's upgrades or whether it's other products or whether it's promotions and partnering. And the only way you can do that is getting those insights into that customer behaviour, but getting it quicker than we're probably getting it now. Yeah. The other side is a lot of organisations are still in that data churn world of we're trying to sort that out. How we move forward and get above that, that's the real big step change, I think.
But I also think there's a thing where we talk about the title of the session is entitled around creating customer-centric, sort of almost products in a way. We were talking before, and the creation of products that's nice. It's if you can get it right the first time, that's fine. But actually, excellence is about repeatable habits, about building up that sort of internal musculature, and so this pursuit of customer centricity or customer obsession and things is a habit, it's a behaviour, it's a cultural kind of change. I know, Gerald, there's something that we were talking about that Lufthansa's gone kind of through, and it continues to go through. And this is something I guess is probably on everybody's kind of mind, because it's the really, really hard bit, right? That we don't necessarily talk about. It's like, how do you get that culture that builds that resilience, that builds that sort of like that focus on the customer, keeps them at the center of everything they do. I mean, how are you doing it? I mean, to be able to keep, to navigate these changes and to keep producing things that resonate with customers and building those relationships, but also driving commercial value as well.
Yeah, that's a very tricky question, but
should we go off and get a coffee while you can?
Let's make a break here. No, actually, we are on this journey, to be honest. And what we are doing is we have already, let's say, an agile. It's a cultural thing, as you said, and we have already an agile, let's say, working method in place at Lufthansa. But what we have right now, we are platform-centric oriented. So we have agile teams around the .com, the apps, and so on. And what we are now changing in terms to better understand the customer needs and preferences is we are, if you like, we are switching the model by 90 degrees. So we are looking from the customer journey. We are cutting the customer journey into pieces where value for the customer is created. And around these values, we are building up end-to-end product teams which are responsible and empowered to deliver those customer values, right? And that's a completely different also mindset and culture, what we're trying to establish. But the idea is, of course, to be closer to the customer, also to the customer needs, and to be faster also in delivering those needs.
Can I ask you, those teams, are they multifunctional teams, and therefore you push them closer to the kind of the customer kind of interface?
Yes, it's a multifunctional business and IT together, but all the necessary disciplines and capabilities you need is within the team. So data analytics, UI, UX, everything you need to build really these customer products. And the idea is really to get faster. And as I said, this is what we call a digital hangar, right? So we had it yesterday. I think Ava was speaking about it. It's a virtual operating model, and as I said, we are switching the model by 90 degrees, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds very much along the lines of the sort of model that Spotify can popularise, around tribes and all these sort of things, but multifunctional teams that are focused on delivering value at the point of demand.
Yes. I mean, as you know, we are much more complicated than Spotify. It's not an excuse, it's a pity. That's why it is more a combination of a let's say, of a separate legal entity we are currently establishing, working together with all the airline entities where we still have employees, right? So it's kind of a cross-functional, cross-location virtual organization.
Did you start that process pre-COVID, during COVID?
We actually started it, I would say, half a year ago.
Okay, right, so quite recently.
Yeah, so quite recently this year, because we had a lot of migrations in front of us. That's what we did during the pandemic. So we basically migrated to one app, to one .com, to one booking process, one ID we had yesterday, one travel ID we launched recently, one payment hub. We're building also payment hub. This will be done by beginning of next year. So, and in between, so as I said, 6 months ago, we started this journey because we said, okay, there is a nice saying, you need to centralize for structure, but you need to decentralize for speed. And that's what we are now doing. So we are now switching the model.
Thank you for that, Gerald. Anuradha, you kind of mentioned some of the challenges that you face because you're dealing with kind of multiple different types of brands that have different kind of propositions and different customer bases and everything else. And it's like going, but you're still operating from a central kind of operating structure. How do you kind of get that? How does that customer centricity, that customer obsession, sort of work when you're working with different brands that have different propositions? Not that Lufthansa doesn't, but the Whitbread might have a slightly broader sort of like spread. How does it work for Whitbread?
Yeah, so basically, it's a journey, at the end of the day. So the most important thing that we try to concentrate on is really looking at the brand. What does it stand for? The demographics, the proposition, all of those kinds of things, because a lot has changed in terms of where you want to take the brand to, post, the pandemic. So as a result of which, one of the things we have started doing is looking at research. So all of the things that we want the brand to do, is that really resonating with our customers? And if not, through that research, we are trying to get as much data as possible. Because there is a ton of data. It's about analyzing the data, really interrogating it, understanding the whys. Because there is a lot of messages that customers leave behind as a part of those touch points. It's about really understanding that. So that's where it sort of starts. The next bit is around, the technology and the tools that we have. Is our platform robust enough to deliver the plans that we have for that year or even 2 years? Because it's no point with everything that is hitting us, out of the blue. It's almost like you can't plan, 5 years out, 10 years out. You have to be very agile, very nimble, very flexible in terms of how you operate. So that's the second aspect. The third is people.
Well, I was going to say, you have to kind of get to the point where it's like, this is not about just creating products that you go do and they work themselves, but this is like, you're dealing right down into kind of like people on the ground.
I'm growing my team.
Yeah.
Because it's really important, not just you have the right skill sets on the team, but also the right number of people so that everybody can concentrate on what they need to do. They are real specialists in what they're doing, and they can influence the overall decision making. So that's the third aspect. And then the other thing, which goes without saying, testing and learning. I cannot stress that enough.
Sure.
So, building on that minimum viable product, continuously adding value to the product that you have. So it's a whole cultural approach and a change. It doesn't happen overnight. So like I said, circling back, it's a journey. It is not something that, we can change. And I think every brand in the business, is on that journey.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. I love the idea about from the research sort of thing. Somebody said something to me really interesting a little while ago where they were talking about research. It's like, it's not just about what customers tell you, it's also about what they don't tell you.
Yes.
It's almost like figuring out where the gaps are, or the white spaces, as it were, and so that what that implies. But I wanted to come to just Andy and Toby, because whereas Gerald and Anuradha kind of are deep on their specific kind of businesses, you guys kind of almost kind of traverse kind of different kind of clients. And Andy wanted to ask you, but I think the game is internally or by organizations, how do you build the customer-centric kind of culture that allows you to produce these compelling, differentiated experiences? I mean, what are you seeing across your customer base about what are the best or the most successful people kind of doing and to help them get it right?
It depends across industries, as always, right? I talked about e-commerce and retail because there's a lot of synergies there, but that's a big churn. That's multiple products, that's keeping those buyers' baskets as full as possible, not losing people from jumping out of their baskets or going to competitors, right? But then you've got, from a user experience and a customer-centric focus, is making their journey easier, making therefore your own team's journey easier in terms of dealing with the customer. We talk about delighting travellers. Let's start with making their experience easier. I think that's the starting point, right? And we're talking about the data and getting that right, and different organisations are in different journeys. But if you're looking at somebody who's doing recruitment, somebody in a company that's in real estate, it's all about making that, we talk about journey, very applicable in travel, is making it as easy as possible to start with. Okay, and that's whether I've got fewer touch points, I can see everything in one place, that sort of nirvana, and then we look at, right, how do we add on things and delight, and that helps you with your own, I think, culture as well, because if as a team you know what the customer's getting to start with, then how do we build on that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think this is, and I wanted to apply the same kind of question, or ask Toby you the same question. It's like, you traverse different client accounts, different sort of industries, and to draw on your sort of exposure, your experience, to say, what are some of the most successful companies kind of doing kind of well to get this right, because it is a journey. Yeah. There is no right answer. There is no destination travel. But it is that journey. What is it? What are they doing?
I think when I look at travel, like travel's in a very fortunate place. So Epsilon deals with lots of different verticals. So we work with retail brands and finance and consumer electronics. And travel's in a really fortunate place in that you as a consumer, I think, I can't think of another transaction where you give up more information about yourself. Like, I think maybe apart from buying a house, that's the only other thing I can think of. Like, but you give your name, your address, your passport number, your kids, your names, their ages, the whole like thing. So when you see a travel brand that does it really, really well and is understanding that wealth of data that they have about a consumer and the kind of the people that travel with that consumer, it's amazing. So I guess the people, Marriott, so we do a bit of work with Marriott, but even aside from that, I'm a Marriott Bonvoy member. And
where's Ben?
Yeah,
Ben
shout out to the Marriott crew in the audience. But the information they retain, the information that when I go to check into a Marriott property that they have about me, I'm allergic to feathers, boring fact. But it's awkward when you're in a hotel and you have feathered bedding.
People think that feathered kind of pillows are kind of like
exactly, yeah,
really nice.
But we did a staycation during COVID, and we stayed at a Marriott, and I walked in there, and they did the check-in, and they were, "Oh, Mr. Morris, so nice to see you again. Great. Oh, and we've got your room ready, and and your bedding, there was no feathers as requested." And my teenage sons looked at me as if I owned that hotel. It was amazing. But it was all, but then from a customer perspective, it was incredible. So, so I think, they're doing it very, very well. I think there's kind of other brands in the space that are sort of doing it well. I think from a retail perspective, it's different. I talk to lots of people in our business about the differences between retail and travel, because obviously retail is much more transactional. People don't necessarily think about where they're buying a pair of jeans; they just want a pair of jeans. It is much more of a kind of maybe more a transactional thing rather than travel, which is you kind of build affinity with the brand. But yeah, I think there are lots of brands doing it when you travel. But
thank you for that. So actually, before I get hauled off, where is he over there? So, one question. Fine. So, we've got time for one more question, or one question from the audience? One question from the audience, okay. Because what I was going to say is, like, it feels to me, Toby, correct me if I'm wrong, is like you're almost implying that the travel brands that do it right and do it well, they embody the trust. They build that trust. They have a duty of care. You give them so much information, and there's too many brands that think they almost expect to be trusted because of the brand that they are, rather than actually earning the trust and delivering on the trust. And sometimes they're delivering on the trust and continue to deliver on the trust. That's the hardest kind of thing, because it can be sensitive, and you put yourself in maybe a different sort of place, and that has you have particular kind of needs. And I think that's one of the things that we've got to try and do is build the relationships. So we're all in the business of relationships. That's it. We're delivering things that we're trying to build a relationship with people that drives revenue, drives loyalty. But in the very heart of that, it's about trust. And I think if we get that, if we develop a trustful relationship with our customers, I don't think we're going to go far wrong. Time for one question in the audience. Who's going to shoot their hand up first? Because there is only going to be one. This is not Highlander, by the way. Any questions? Really, none? Thank you. What? Can I ask you to introduce yourself, sir, and then address your question to the panel?
Hello, my name is Dan. I'm from Mount Vacation. I would have a question for Gerald. So if I understood you right, you said that you realized that now there are much more customer needs to find alone the information about, so to resolve alone the problem. Do you think that is the case because during the pandemic, when you had a lot of refunds, your customer service was not able to deliver on every request on a good time frame, and they started to look alone? Or it is just a general because there are so many different platforms, so many different apps, and we will see this across other parts of the journey as well?
It was a little bit hard to understand because of the it was quite
volume.
Yeah, thank you. The volume. I was looking for the word. Sorry. You can tell me if I understood the question correctly, please. I think in terms of April 21, right? So beginning of 21, when we saw that travel regulations or the countries announced travel regulations, different ones, it was quite hard for the customer to understand what do I really need to get into the country and to get out, and what are the regulations, do I have to quarantine or not, and things like that. And we faced a lot of those questions, right? So where do I really, where can I go as a customer, and is it safe to go there, and what kind of documents do I need to get in and out? And these questions we tried to provide in terms of kind of a travel map, right, where you can see also with traffic lights, is it safe to go or not safe to go, and which kind of documents you need to enter and to get out. And the second part, what we did is we also implemented functionalities, features in the app where you can store your travel documents, that the process itself is getting smoother for you as a customer, right? Because also, you didn't know which travel documents you needed, and B, it was really hard on the journey to have it in place, right? And that's what we basically did. Was it the answer to your question?
Well, what I told is, so you said that people now, or customers now, are more willing to look for information alone and resolve alone the problem.
Yes.
And what I wanted to ask you is, do you think this is because of the, let's say, beginning of the COVID, when there have been such a big demand on customer service, and that most of the customer service were not able to deliver on time, so they said, I'd rather look alone than wait 2 weeks for the answer?
Yes, I would say so. And also, what we sustainably see is actually still a big increase in the sessions. So still customer looking for information, right? So the sessions on our .coms really increased by 50%, I would say. So it's we still have the same situation, but of course the environment changed in between, right? So we don't have so much regulations in place anymore.
Just to balance it out, I'm going to ask the panel, and much to the chagrin of Josh over there, who's glowering at me, but I'm going to ask you for a final word. In the pursuit of these delightful, customer-centric digital experiences, your best advice, Andy? Do this. Andy says, do this.
In a word?
Well, a short sentence.
I don't do short sentences. People who talk to me have figured that one out. I think it's making the experience easier to start with.
Fantastic.
Simpler.
Simpler, easier, thank you. Gerald?
I tried to put it in one word. I like what you said, people.
Perfect, thank you. Anuradha?
Listening and communicating well.
Fantastic, thank you. Toby?
Knowing your customer. If you don't know that your customer is your customer across their different devices, doesn't matter.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, the panel, give me a round of applause, please.